have on today's session, Kelly. So
Excellent.
I know, just so before, because obviously you're going to talk a little bit about your background and your work as part of a kind of presentation that we're going to go through. So I guess it's just this kind of interesting start off area, because obviously, like you were saying, you've been at the festival before. You've actually been to the festival, even though right now you're in Montana, right?
Actually, right now I'm in Martha's Vineyard. I live in Montana half of the time, and then half the time I live in Tarzana. So you never know where I am.
Martha's Vineyard, is that where the Obamas had their part?
Yes.
Barack had his 60. Is that why you're in Martha's Vineyard?
No. I got here afterwards. I don't even know that I would have been invited. However, a few years ago, back in 2016, I did work on a committee called ECHO that did interface with the Obama administration. I was invited to South by Southlawn, so I kind of tangentially rub elbows with the Obama clan, but nowhere. I think they would want me like 400 feet away. So I'm not connected in any way. Would love to be, but it's a beautiful place. We're up in Martha's Vineyard. It's off the coast of Boston, and it's a gorgeous place. We're expecting a hurricane this weekend, so we'll see how that goes. But thankfully, during this presentation, we will. It's sunny skies outside.
Great. That's really, really good to know. All right. So look, because we have a limited amount of time and we just want to kind of extract the maximum amount of knowledge from you. I mean, you were going to share your screen, right?
Yeah, I'll share my screen. What I wanted to just let everyone know is that we have about 12 slides that I've put together for you. And the topic was about creating your writing career game plan. My concept for this is just, and this is part of what I put in a book that's coming out in October, on October 5th, is that I wanted to write this book that was sharing information about Hollywood in particular and how to get in for emerging artists and writers and directors, but primarily for writers, and some of the insider information that not everybody knows. And one of the chapters that I have is about your game plan and how to craft who you are as an artist, and then how to share that information so that you can increase your opportunities. So that's what I wanted to talk about, and I will run through sort of the highlights of this so that we can get into more of a discussion. But I thought it would be a really great way for us to set the table, and then we can move from there. Brilliant. So I will share screen with everyone.
Okay.
And let's go to, there we go. Okay.
Wonderful.
So here's the beautiful, look at that beauty. I took this picture myself. So this is my beautiful slide about what we're going to talk about. So let me start with a little bit of background on who I am so that you know why I'm telling you all of this information. I grew up a lover of content in all ways. I watched every movie and every television show I could possibly see. And I spent my career in entertainment, my entire career. And it's been 30 plus years, going on 35, I think, right now. And I actually began my career as an assistant. I got in through working for a manager who is now a very famous manager named Dolores Robinson. You probably have heard of her. She's Holly Robinson, Pete's mom. I worked for her for about a month before I thought I was going to get fired, and decided to preemptively walk across the street and go work for a casting company. But not soon after, I ended up working on the writing side with supporting some executive producers who were writing a television series. And that was my real entree into working with writers and working with material, and I loved it. And from there, I bounced back and forth a little bit in the industry from the TV side to the film side, and became a feature film executive, working for Laura Ziskin and for Gary Marshall. Laura Ziskin produced Pretty Woman and What About Bob and a number of other movies. She was very famous for doing the Spider-Man series of films. And I also worked for Gary Marshall, who obviously directed Pretty Woman and came from the Happy Days world, and very famous director as well. So I worked for them, and then I came back into the television fold in the early 90s, working for Fox Television. I'll show you this is let's see if I can do this. Oops, hold on. There we go. This is sort of my resume. I've worked at every single studio in Los Angeles. So I did go back after working for, and on the feature side, I worked for Fox when Martin was just premiering, and I developed Living Single and a bunch of other shows, including The Wild Thornberrys. So I don't know that didn't actually air on Fox, but it did air on Nickelodeon. Yeah. It started at Fox, as did Clueless started at Fox. Yeah. And then I went to work for UPN, and under UPN, which is a Paramount company, I was the head of comedy development for UPN, and we developed Girlfriends and The Parkers, and we put Moesha and Clueless on the air, and then I realized that I wanted to learn a little bit more about the selling side of things. So I became a producer and had a show on the air and sold a lot of projects, and wound up doing a lot of drama. So it wasn't just comedy. I was expanding my repertoire into the drama field. And then from there, I ended up working for NBC Universal, which was a very, very different kind of job. It was a corporate job, but it gave me a different vantage point. I was able to finally see what was it like from the corporate side of things. I was in charge of diversity for 20 different networks. So I had a bird's eye view of how the industry works from a corporate setting. And then I went back to the creative side when I went to HBO and ran the writers and directors programs, among other programs as well, but back working with writers on a very granular level. So that's essentially my history in the entertainment business.
Wow.
At the end of my tenure at HBO, I decided to make a complete career change. And I left HBO to get a writing deal with HBO, and I'm writing now. So not only do I have this book that's coming out in October. Hold on. How do we go? I don't know how to advance this. Wouldn't that be great if I did know how to work this?
It's all right. Don't worry. I know.
Hold on.
I'll hit space bar.
There we go. There we go. So not only did I have a chance to sort of do all of those things, but I also could write a book. And now I'm working on a television show for Fox. So it's a little bit of a 360. So let's talk a little bit about the magic of storytelling, because that's why everyone who is listening to this is here. We all want to have our stories told. And I think the important question to begin with is just, why you? Why do you want to do it? What's in your gut that's making you do it? Because that's going to drive you every single waking day to create material and to keep on this road. And I do think that the people who stick with it eventually make it. It might not be exactly how you planned. I didn't envision my trajectory to look so windy, but I took some interesting opportunities, and because of those opportunities, I wound up with a really great vantage point of being able to see the industry in so many different ways. So I think sometimes when we put something in our heads that is, oh, I want to work at HBO, or I want to work at ABC, we limit our ability to take those unusual avenues that might give us something really exciting that might bring us back to a really fulfilling career. So I ask all of you to think about what's in your gut, that why are you so driven to do this, and then follow that, because that's going to help. That's going to sort of open up a lot of things that we're going to talk about today. So what we're going to go through briefly are these topics. Why it's important for you to pick a lane. What is your lane? What scripts are going to be in your arsenal? What do you need? What your mission statement is. So how do you talk about yourself professionally to people? Your personal statement and how you talk about yourself personally to people. And then your network. So how do you network with people? How do you connect? And then how do you follow up? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about why it's important to pick a lane. This is something that people always hear. They say, they're always telling me, I should stay in a lane, or I should pick a lane when I'm early in my career. Well, there's a really practical reason for that. This has nothing to do with your ability to write amazing things. You could be someone who can write drama and comedy and action and romance and historical fiction and graphic novels. You could probably do everything. But in the very beginning of your career, the practical reason for picking a lane is about who you are talking to. It's not about you, it's about us. So I'm going to put on my executive hat for a second, as opposed to my writer hat. When I was an executive sitting in a meeting and a writer would come in and say, I do X, Y, or Z. If they told me that they did drama or they did very specific action or R-rated comedy, I knew exactly what I could do with them. And my goal in that meeting is to find out from them who I need to send them to. So if my job, particularly as a person in the diversity seat, but even as an executive on the development side, I'm listening for who do I introduce that writer to. So is it a showrunner to get on a show? Excuse me. Is it another writer? Is it another executive who works in the drama or the comedy department? But if you come in and you tell me, oh, I write everything, I don't know what that means. I don't know who to send you to because I could send you to 20 different people. I need a clear directive. I need you to tell me I am this specific person, because then I can say, oh, I know the perfect show for you. I'm going to introduce you to Damon Lindelof. I'm going to introduce you to Charles Murray. That's the importance of it, because we are so inundated with emails and phone calls and meetings that our minds are spinning at a very, very fast clip. And when you make me work too hard to figure out what to do with you, I won't do anything.
Yeah.
And then you'll never hear back. You'll never hear if I loved your script or I didn't love your script, because I'm confused by it. That's why it's important for you to pick a lane in the beginning of your career. Once you have been established, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
You can write whatever you want. And many writers do. They go off and they start as a comedy writer and they end up as a drama writer. That's fine. But when you're getting your start, we need to know who you are, and you have to be intentional about that.
That's so interesting, because it really matches up with my experience recently, where with a lot of the commissioning editors I'm talking to and trying to introduce them to talent, they want to know, the comedy guys want to know that the person that we're talking about is absolutely dedicated to comedy, because they just simply don't have the time to deal with anybody else, because they're in the comedy department and it's their job all day to do comedy. And it's the same for drama. And so I think it's really, that idea of picking your lane is very, very important.
Right. I think that's the thing, is that people don't often know it's practical.
Yeah,
it's not
absolutely.
a personal thing.
It's not about limiting you or
right.
disbelief in your abilities. It's about how practically people don't have all day, every day to deal with everything.
Exactly. All right, let's see if we can get to the next slide. It feels like it changes every second. Okay, hold on. There we go. Okay, your arsenal. So when you're coming out as a writer, you need a certain number of scripts to show that you are good at what you're doing. You're a good writer, but we can't just look at just one script and say, oh, you've mastered the craft. We have to see multiple things. We want to make sure that you're not a one-hit wonder. So you need really three strong pieces in your arsenal in order to come out strong. The first piece is your introductory piece. So when I came out as a writer onto the scene, I had one piece of material that I had actually gotten into Sundance with, and that was my introductory piece. It was the piece of material that I sent out in order to get a manager, but also then my manager sent out to introduce me to the town. So that's the first piece. The second piece is they want to know that you have a follow-up piece, that you aren't just one hit wonder and you haven't been working on this one script for 7 years. They want to know that you have a second piece that's just as strong. Yeah. That second piece also still needs to be in the same lane as your first piece. Yeah. And again, there's a practical reason. So let's just say you're going up for a show to be a staff writer on a particular show, and it's a horror show. I don't know if they have many horror shows, but it's a horror show in my mind. So so you sent them that first piece of material. If your second piece of material is a comedy, then they will have no idea that you can really deliver the horror genre. So they need to see something second, and it's drama. It could be a dark drama. It could be You know, it has to be sort of similar. It doesn't have to be exactly the same lane, but it should be similar. It shouldn't be 1.5 hour and 1 hour. It should be fairly similar, so that then they can say, oh yes, of course you are, you know, you have what it takes in order to be staffed on this show. Your third piece, you're going to find, it comes into play very quickly after your first 2 pieces are burned in the town. So once someone has read your first couple of pieces, they're going to want another piece. And that's just to keep the doors open. But you're going to need that fairly quickly. So I felt that I needed that third piece within 6 months of my first 2 pieces going out. You can't keep sending the first 2 pieces out over and over and over again. Eventually someone's going to want something new. And so you need to have that third piece. Now, here's where it's interesting. You don't have to have a screenplay or script. It can be another piece of material in the beginning. I found that
that's one of the questions is, could a play be considered part of
absolutely, absolutely. And people love plays, particularly in Hollywood. They love theater. HBO is crazy about playwrights. So absolutely, it could also be a short story. And I know a writer who, it was a Canadian writer who was staffed on a show because she had a wonderful short story.
Yeah.
So short stories work, and short film scripts. So I had a bunch of comedy material. So I had a comedy screenplay. I think I had 3 comedy half-hour scripts. And then I had this short 5-page dramatic piece, which was my only dramatic piece at the time. And someone had asked me for a dramatic piece, and I was like, well, I don't have a full screenplay, and I don't have a full script. And they took that short piece and they loved it, and I ended up getting an opportunity off of it. So it can be an unusual piece that doesn't necessarily align with your scripts. So keep an open mind. You don't have to go crazy about writing and getting that third piece perfect. And sometimes it takes a little while to generate it. But if you can get a really strong other kind of piece, it can be anything really, just to show that you are creative and you are still staying in your lane, that will help. The last thing I'll say about the arsenal is, when this is in olden times, back 15 years ago, when people were still reading spec scripts, sometimes you needed a spec of an existing show that was already on the air. We don't do that as much anymore, but there are still some people who do prefer to read a spec script. So, and this is just primarily in the US. I don't know what the market is in the UK, if this is something that applies or does not apply. But in the US, sometimes it's still helpful to have a spec script. And that just means something that's an A-list show on the air right now that people know, that you just have done something that's in that vein, that voice, so that people know, oh, she can write, or he can write someone else's voice. So that's something to keep in mind and to think about. And if there's a show that you just absolutely love, and hopefully there is a show that you love, then spec that show.
It's interesting. It's one of the opportunities that we find that sometimes comes up in terms of developing new writers on shows, is that when a show's in development, they'll often have some writers who are shadowing the script. So they'll be creating a script for the show. They're in a shadow role. So they'll produce a whole script, and it will set them up for the next block or the second series for them to take on the writer's role. So we see that happens quite a lot.
There you go. There you go. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your mission statement. So when I was coming out as a writer, and I use that term sort of, it's an odd term for me to use, but I sort of feel like it's appropriate. When I was being introduced to the world as a writer, I had a very challenging time in the very beginning with my managers, who were amazing people. I love them. They were at 3 Arts. And they said, well, you could be whatever you want. No one knows you as a writer. You can do whatever you want. And so they sent me a number of books, and the books I didn't feel were at all what I thought of myself as a writer. And I called a writer named Malcolm Spellman, who did The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, who's a friend of mine. And he said, you need to write a mission statement. And so I did. And what I did was put on paper who I thought I was as a writer. The reason that that was so important is that it stopped me from wasting their time and from them wasting my time.
Yeah.
And you will find that when people start to come to you to write things, you'll get everybody's idea about who you are until you tell them who you are. And that way you can make sure that you are putting your limits on your time so that you're not reading material that is very foreign to you or that you would never do in a million years. And then you are really focusing yourself on what you want to do. So you need to decide who you are as a writer. And how do you do that? Well, look at the things that interest you. So look at the films and the TV shows and the books that you read. Look at those kinds of material that you feel in your gut excites you, and ask yourself, well, why does it excite you? When I think about the things that I wanted to write, they were all in line with the things that I watch. So it's pretty much going to be fairly easy for you to pick out who you want to be as a writer, and you'll see the themes that have come through your material that you've done so far. They will start to percolate up and to resonate with you. I tend to write relationships quite a bit, and I do a lot of banter in my material, whether I'm doing a drama or a comedy, and I particularly prefer the comedy or the action, and sometimes I combine them. But then write all of that down, because all of that is going to be important for you to put into one place, into one concise piece of material, so that you can send that out to whoever you need to send it out to. I'm going to also talk to you about your personal narrative, because that's equally as important. When you are doing your personal narrative, when you sit down in a meeting, the first thing that anybody's going to ask you is they're going to ask you, tell me about yourself. So you need to be able to talk to someone about your history as a writer in a very, very concise way. You're going to use this as your elevator speech, which is going to be a 20-second version.
Like when she's, doing her.
Just a reminder to everyone, to help us with today's session. If you could keep your mics off for the moment and your cameras off, and when we're ready, we'll get people to ask questions and come on. But for the moment, yeah, please. Thanks, everyone.
It's sort of like my grandma's kitchen. Like, everybody comes. So when you're talking about your personal narrative, someone's going to ask you, tell me about yourself. You're going to be able to, at the drop of a hat, be able to speak about who you are as a person, and what are those moments in your life that have brought you to this meeting. They will also ask, well, where do you see yourself going in the future? So be ready with that as well. But that together, your mission statement and your personal statement are going to be your meeting, really. That's going to make up all of your meeting. So I'm going to share with you my mission statement really quickly.
Wow.
So here's my mission statement. And there's a little bit more to it, because I do a couple more examples later on, but I'll tell you about that. So I sent this to my managers when I first started out, and it helped incredibly. So I said, I'm not ashamed to say that I love happy endings. I love movies with humor and wonder. I'm not big on things steeped in pain or suffering. There are many wonderful dramatic writers who can write about sadness and serial killers much better than I. I want to write things where the hair on the back of your neck goes up, or you get choked up. You can't turn the pages fast enough because you know what's coming and can't wait till it gets here. Or maybe you don't even see it coming at all. I like surprises and twists, and I like to have fun along the way. Think of me as the 30% bitchier Nora version of Nora Ephron. And then here are the things I wish I'd written: Field of Dreams, A Beautiful Mind, The Long Shot, The Professional, Searching, Role Models, The Sixth Sense, anything with the name Jason Bourne in it.
Yeah.
And then I also included a piece that said, here are things that I would never in a zillion years think to write. And things like Handmaid's Tale, Scarface, New Jack City, and Call Me by Your Name.
Yeah.
Never occurred to me to ever write those. So that helped them incredibly. And after that, every opportunity that they sent my way was in line with who I thought I was.
Yeah.
So that's important.
That idea of helping people to help you, I think, is really, really key, and having some empathy for the people that you're talking to and understanding a little bit about what they're doing so that you give them the best chance of helping you, I think, is a really key idea.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, everyone's on your side. You know, nobody wants to spend time reading a script that they hate and meeting with people they don't like. You know, if you've gotten to the place where you're in a meeting, they like you.
Yeah.
They're not going to waste their time. So let's talk a little bit about representation. And again, I don't know the UK market as well as I know the US market, but I will tell you that I do think that there may be some learnings that might be helpful. So landing an agent or a manager is something that always comes up, and people are always worried that they're not going to find somebody. They want to take whoever will represent them. It's not always the best idea. But when you are really ready and you have all your material together and you have your mission statement, your personal statement, and you're ready to go, I always tell people that you are going to find your first job before you find your representation. The chances are very good, particularly in the US, that the manager or agent comes on board only when they have realized that you are a money maker. So if you get on staff or you sell something, then they'll come. Because think about it, they've got all these clients that they're servicing already. They don't need to jumpstart your career. You need to jumpstart your career, and then they will come on and represent you for the rest of your career. Yeah. So how do you showcase yourself? Well, you can do it a number of ways. You can get a play out there. You can put that play into competition. You can mount it yourself. You can do a reading of it. As we said before, Hollywood loves theater writers, or playwrights. So write some plays. You can take your script, your screenplay, and enter it into competitions. You can do those for readings as well. You can go to festivals. And by the way, those festivals and those competitions are great places to meet managers and agents. They are trolling those events to find who's winning those events. And that's when they will come to you. At one point, I was a semifinalist for the Nickel Fellowship with an action comedy. And even as a semifinalist, I had 5 people reach out to me and say, are you interested in representation? I already had representation at the time, but those are 5 contacts that would have been helpful if I did not have them. So make sure that you're making use of all of that. I will also say, and I didn't put it on here, but programs are another way for you to get recognized. Everybody who went through the HBO writers and directors programs all had representation. They got them in a snap, because if you're in a program, you've already sort of gotten through the gauntlet of the 3,500 other people who have tried to get in. So that's important to agents and managers, because they're looking for the best of the best. Who has the juice to go the distance? So apply to those. Even people who didn't get into our program, we ended up setting up with, if they had reached the semifinalists level, we always helped them find representation if they wanted it. We sent their material out. We supported them regardless. And some of those people are doing just great because we also gave them a little bit of an assist. So you find yourself on the radar, even if you just get to a certain level of any competition or reading or festival or program. I also would say that I do think it may be slow going, but the international market is expanding. I know that when I was at HBO, and I know that Warner Media right now, they are starting to expand. They've already gone into Canada. We already started a foothold in the UK, which is how I met S.O.U.L Fest in the first place. So there are, on that front, I know that things are moving forward, as is Netflix, who have executives overseas as well. So things are starting to percolate. And I do think with things like, with people like Michaela Cole, that's a great, everyone's looking for the next Michaela Cole. So if you're the next Michaela Cole, Hollywood wants to know who you are. Yeah. So I do think that there's going to be opportunity. Okay, so I only have a couple more slides, but one of them is about your network. So this is your contacts. My first line of defense is always my writers group. And this is a writers group. This picture is of Lena Waithe's women's brunch. So she has a Black women's brunch. And I believe it happens usually every year, obviously not this year, not last year, but it's a great community to be a part of. And
I don't think of writers as being this well dressed.
I think they all showed up because they knew they were going to get in the photograph. But yes, you're probably right. But I don't know who you have, what kind of writers groups you might have in the UK, but I have a number of them. You know, the bigger ones are things. Hopefully, you get on those lists for something like this. But then there are your own personal group of people is a great place to start. My writers group, I think, is anywhere from 5 people on a given day to maybe 8. We keep them small because you need to have people who are giving and getting feedback.
Yeah.
But again, it's those people who are going to be your go-tos to giving you the opportunities. They're gonna know who's looking for a writer for a particular project or a job on a show before everybody else. So you're going to use that network first, hopefully, primarily. And then from there, you can build out. So you're going to have your social media handles. Hopefully you are all on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and you have a personal website. Certainly, it's an important way to communicate. Not everyone is comfortable with social media, but I do think having a presence is helpful. And a couple of ways this shows up. Number one, when you are on one of these socials and you are a comedy writer and you're funny, people will notice that and people will remember that, and they will always go to your page and they want to see what you're doing. And that's a great way to get your voice out there so that people know who you are. I have done that quite consistently. People come to me for things because I'm posting something that they like. They are looking at me as a writer now. So there's a connective tissue here that you can build on. And I also will give you a little story about when we were sourcing writers for Last Week Tonight. This is a John Oliver show. They in particular wanted people who were politically minded, but also had some sort of social media presence because they wanted someone who was topical. And people who are on Twitter and Facebook and all of those things and they're posting regularly are people who are topical. So we were looking for journalists, we were looking for people who did podcasts, but we were also looking at people's social media. So that's one reason I think if you want to write late night or you want to write sketch comedy, you know, if you don't have a presence, it seems a little weird that you're not engaged with the world. So make sure that you're taking advantage of it. Yeah. It took me a long time. I hated it. And until last year, when my publisher said, well, what's your reach? And I went, I don't know, I have 34 Twitter followers. He was not impressed. I now have over 600. So I think that, you know, it's doable. You can do it in 6 months. Yeah. And then as I sort of said before, conferences, festivals, events, and organizations in particular are great ways to expand your network. So we're all attending online. It's a little bit more challenging now, but there are ways to connect with people. I've had quite a few people reach out to me on LinkedIn. I do my best to answer everyone. Sure. So I think that you just have to start to reach out, and now I think is a great time because we are all remote, and hopefully this will keep going for forever, and we will be a combination of remote and in person. It's much easier to connect with someone who is not in your city because everyone is doing it remotely. It's the same amount of time. No one has to fly 18 hours to get to you. In organizations in particular, and again, you'll have to tell me, but I would assume that the BFI and BAFTA and that some of these organizations that you are part of, S.O.U.L Fest as well, are great places to connect with other people. They are also great training grounds. So if you want to listen to panelists talk about, you know, how to perfect your craft, those are great places to meet people, not only the people who are on that dais, if you get a minute with them, but also the people who are at your level and around you. You're going to pick up a lot of information and you're going to pick up a lot of relationships. The key is following up. Yeah. This is a hard part. And I don't know anybody who's perfected this other than maybe my friend Pete Chapman, who's a director, who's got a crazy spreadsheet that he works like magic. But what I do is I keep a spreadsheet and I note on that spreadsheet the name of the person that I'm connecting with, when I met them, you know, what the follow-up was, if I owe them a script or I don't owe them a script, or if I passed them on to my manager so that I can then follow up with my team. I can follow up myself. When you are following up, particularly if someone else set up the meeting for you, make sure you exchange information with that person directly, and then send a nice card. And then keep pinging them every few months just to say, hey, I just want to let you know this is what I'm doing. Don't ask for anything if you can avoid it. They will just keep you top of mind. So, and that'll happen automatically. I like to send out little funny, stupid cards every now and again. So for Christmas, actually it was for New Year's this last year, I didn't make the Christmas card cutoff. It was Christmas and I was like, I'll get to it, and I never got to it. But for New Year's, I figured no one's sending out a New Year's card, especially not e-cards. No one does that. Who cares? So I sent out a little card, and it was just a little, 2021, beautiful on a blue background and sparkly, whatever. And it just said, I hope you have a great new year. And I just blasted it to all my contacts on the phone. And I was surprised at how many people sent back oh, hey, I wanted to know what your phone number was, or I was meaning to reach out to you. And that helped jumpstart those relationships. So sometimes it can be as simple as just a little photo of something and then a nice little message. It does not have to be a life-altering, terrible thing that you have to go through.
I like
you worry about sending the right thing.
The methodical nature of it, though. Being methodical. I followed up, I'm keeping some sort of a note or keeping track of that, and just not making it too onerous, but being methodical about following up with people. The amount, I gave up on business cards because it's like, I felt like every time I handed one out was like an investment of 20 pence in someone. And then if they didn't actually use the details on the card, it was quite disappointing. So I stopped it. If you need my details, like, let's exchange them or whatever. But that was the whole point, So I think that sort of being methodical about maintaining those relationships and just gently nudging them along a little bit at a time is definitely a key point there.
Right. And you have to remember, and by the way, I'm not a business card person either. I would rather take my phone and just, text you my information. But you have to remember that in the US, we had a security breach on the Sony lot. So the Sony emails were hacked, and all these Sonys, so everything got pushed out, and it was very embarrassing for the Sony executives. So because of that, the entire Hollywood industry now wipes everyone's emails every 30 days. So unless you have archived your emails, those emails don't exist. That's why it's important for writers or anybody who's trying to network to ping your executive every few months, just to say, hey, just wanted to, and that way you're still on their radar. You don't have to say much more than, hey, I found this article, I thought you might be interested, or I read this book, or I saw this show, I think you'd like it. Whatever those things are that maybe you connected with in the room when you met them, ping them about that. Or if you had a great win, hey, I just sold this project, I thought you should know. I'm working with somebody who said they met you. Whatever those things are, and it doesn't have to be a lot, just briefly, and it's actually better if it's not a lot, if it's just something very small, particularly if you are offering them something. Like that article. Then they are appreciative, because remember, every executive has asks coming constantly. And if you're not the person who is giving the ask, be the person who is offering them something. You will shoot to the head of the class. They will find you much more valuable.
I think one of the things is that for people is that often their email inbox is a source of problems. And if you can put something that's just a little bit of joy into that inbox, just to break up all of the worries and the problems, I think that can make you stand out a lot. That's a good point.
100%. I think I only have one more slide. Let's see. Okay, this is the last slide. Cool. And then we can go to Q&A. So putting it all together, I'm just going to add a couple of little other things beyond what we've discussed. We've already talked about how important it is to stay in a lane, so that people know who you are. We've talked about your arsenal, so what kind of material you need. We've talked about your mission statement, so how do you craft that, and personal statement, and that was important. How do you talk about yourself and your career in a very, very concise way. And you need to practice that. Your network, we talked about that. We talked about social media strategy. We even talked a little bit about location and the fact that now that we are virtual, it's a little bit easier to connect. But you can build your profile from wherever you are, put together your website, make sure that you have your social media branded and that you're pushing it out. So you can do that from wherever you are. You can build up that resume of I've done this play and I've done this reading. So make sure that you have that. And then here are the other things that you need to complete this. You will need a bio. You'll need a short bio. We never think about it as writers, but we do need it because every time someone invites you to a panel or introduces you to something or introduces you to someone and says that, you know, I'm going to introduce you to ERA, give me a little couple of sentences. I need that so that I'm not having to craft it for you. But you will need your bio. Even if you enter a contest, you're going to need it, or a festival, you will need it. You will also need a good headshot.
Yeah.
And it's not that hard. You don't have to pay money for it. The headshot that I think that you used, I think in this ERA is, my daughter took it against a white wall. It looks gray, but it's well lit and it was done with an iPhone. Just have a simple background. You would be surprised at how many people I've had to say, well, you know, your headshot is blurry, or it's with you and you know, and you're sitting in front of something weird. So please redo it.
Important, I think, particularly for directors, but it's so important in this business because we're about making TV and film. And if you can't understand the difference between one good picture, how are you supposed to curate 24 a second? Or it just shows a lack of, you know, it kind of telegraphs a lack of understanding. I think it's a really simple thing, but a really good headshot. And your point about that, you can now, these days, you can get an awesome headshot out of an iPhone with a little bit of judicious use of light and framing. I think it's not something that should be holding you back at all.
100%. And the final thing I'll just say is make sure that you're keeping your goal in mind, and that goal, you know, because it's going to help direct you as to who you're trying to network with, what organizations you're going to join. You know, in LA, we have the Writers Guild, we have Producers Guild, we have, you know, all these great organizations that will help further your career. And you can go to almost any of these things as anybody can. But make sure that you know what your goal is, that you keep that in mind and you don't get thrown off course. And then you can use all these other things to sort of help hone that and focus you to looking for the opportunities that may arise, and then the surprises that might come your way that you weren't expecting.
Absolutely. I mean,
that's it.
That's amazing. I mean, the thing is that it's, in terms of the ways that you've kind of presented a lot of that, there are ideas that I can see myself. I'm going to take a week off work after this festival, but I can see there are going to be things. I have a lot of conversations with people who are hoping that I can make the bridge between them and commissioners at the BBC or production companies, and being able to kind of focus people's minds around a few ideas about how they can best present what they have so that I can make the connections for them, I think is really, it's going to be really, really useful for me. So this is a great point at which, if you had a question, I think the simplest way to do this right now is, if you have a question, you can either pop it in the chat, and if you want, you can come on camera and ask it directly, or I can just read it out for you. But if there's a question that you want to ask Kelly now, before, and we've got about just over 10 minutes or so, if you have a question, then please let me know what that question is, and we'll try and get that asked in for you. In the meantime, Kelly, because I know the work that you did at HBO particular was, you did a writers program and you did a directors program. So obviously we've talked a lot today about presenting yourself as a writer. How does it differ for directors in terms of what are the things that they need in their arsenal, and what, you know, are there key messages that you would have for people who are trying to develop themselves as directors?
Yes. Well, in terms of directors, most of this still applies. You still need your mission statement, your personal statement. You need your bio, your headshot. You need to know where you're going. You know, as a director, you may not have scripted material, but you will have shot something, and hopefully you will have shot more than one short. You definitely need two.
Yeah.
It'd be great if you had something more than that, but particularly in particular, you do need at least two pieces of material. Every single program competition, they all ask for a second piece of material. And again, it should be somewhat in your lane,
Yeah.
so that people understand who you are and what your vision is. And preferably something with, in particular, something that's got some movement in the camera shots, so that, you know, we know that you're not just sort of locking off your camera and you're a little afraid of making movement. Hopefully some movement in your characters, and really, really wonderful performances. And I find that the things that make the cut and the things that don't make the cut for directors are when directors are a little bit more slick, when their angles are good, when their lighting is great, when you have a good DP and you've got really good actors and you're getting performances, those things rise above. Even if it's very, very short, those things rise above the things that maybe even be longer, but are more focused on the concept as opposed to getting the true emotion out of a piece of material. I still remember the pieces that I've watched that were just excellently crafted, and those are directors I still try to support. So it's less about I've got a really great action shot and it's really cool, and it's more about, well, is that director eliciting performances? Because when you get an opportunity to direct TV, that's what we want. We want you to tell our story, the story that you've been contracted to. And if you're, doing drone shots, you might get some great drone shots, but if you're not getting the performances, then they're going to pass you over for somebody else.
All right, here, Keith has a really interesting question. He says, thanks for the session, Kelly. Your career has been so diverse. Can you talk about how you may have dealt with and surmounted any bit of imposter syndrome transitioning into becoming a writer?
Keith, what a great question. I love this question. I actually address the imposter syndrome issue in the introduction to my book.
Yeah.
Because it's really important for people to understand that it's a waste of time. Imposter syndrome is a waste of time. And how you can get over this is to remember, Keith, in particular, since you asked this question, remember that moment when you watched a piece of content, whether it was a film or television show, or you read a book, but there was something in probably your childhood, your young childhood, that you wrote that you saw that for the first time you felt not quite so alone or so freakish or so weird, but it was something that really connected with you. You saw an image that reflected yourself back to you. Remember that moment, because someone put that on screen for you. It is your job to do that for someone else. And because imposter syndrome is us running disaster scenarios in our head about what's going to happen, that never happens. Like, it's never that bad. We waste time constantly going over these disasters. Oh, they're going to hate me. Oh, I did that with social media. That was my, imposter syndrome moment where I was like, oh, I'm going to get trolled. What if I put this book out and nobody likes it? So I allow myself about 5 minutes to go through that angst. And then I go, yes, but I need to create something. I need to put that energy into making something, because somewhere someone needs to see what I'm feeling inside on screen. And isn't that more important than how I feel about myself? I need to get over myself so that I can do that for someone else. So I say to you and to anybody who's feeling this moment, that they do not feel good enough, worthy enough. It's not really about that. You don't have to be perfect. Being perfect is a waste of time as well. And we all sort of feel like we need to be perfect. We don't need to be perfect. We have to be honest and authentic. And we need to be courageous enough to share ourselves with all of our flaws. And the flaws make us interesting. The flaws are the best part of us. So even when it's not perfect, it's perfect in its imperfection.
Yeah.
So remember that moment that you felt when you were a kid. And remember that you can do that for someone by bringing all of yourself to the page. And that will get you over imposter syndrome in a flash.
Brilliant. Kim has a question where she asks, as a writer, can you explain the introductory piece? I have several script samples which include produced short films, but I'm not clear which could serve as the intro piece. Are there any characteristics to that introductory piece that you can kind of share with us?
Sure. Your best breakthrough piece is going to be your most honest piece. It's going to be the thing that's closest to who you are. And I will say that I think there are a number of reasons for that. If you look at everything that everyone's first film out of Sundance is usually a very, very personal piece.
Yeah.
And it's because we are seeing for the first time who you have hidden and locked away inside you. And the more you can expose that, the more honest and vulnerable you can be on the page, the more we respond to it. We know it when we see it. When I was sourcing people for HBO's writers program, we never looked at structure because structure can be taught. I can tell you where to put an act break or where to put a moment, that sort of, gives you the push and pull. I don't care about that. But it's hard to teach someone how to, I call it, bleeding on the page. It's hard to have someone sort of cut their insides open and sort of put it all on the table. But that's what we all respond to. And go back and look at those things that you love. You don't love them because they've got pyrotechnics and a high body count. You love them because you connect with the characters. And the more you can have those characters represent who you are and tell us specifically who you are, the more successful you're going to have with your introductory piece. So I say that should be the first thing that you send out. In my own career, I wrote a piece called Make America. It's about you guys probably don't have, I don't know if you have Joy Reid, but or Melissa Harris Perry, but it was about a Black anchor at a cable news network who was going through.
Watch out for those mics, please, guys.
Who was going through a terrible moment essentially after Trump had won. She couldn't take it anymore, and she was medicating with pills and booze and weed. And her boss tells her she has to go off and go to Middle America and find out what makes America great. And the character is 100% who I am. She's opinionated, she's loud, she's bossy, but she also rants and rails about everything about America that she hates and that she loves. And it's how I sound in my head every single day. I'm screaming at the top of my lungs. And so she screams in the top, like from beginning to end, she's just on fire. And I put every ounce of everything that I feel or felt on that page and talked about difficult situations that come up in the course of this. And because I worked in diversity, I had a lot to say. But I think it was a breakthrough for me because people heard who I am. Yeah. And it aligned very, very well with what was on the page.
Great. Robin has a question. He says, who's the best person to introduce your introductory piece to? He also wants to know if Peter Piper picked a pickled pepper as well. But the best person to introduce your introductory piece to?
I think it's anybody that you feel you want to introduce yourself as a writer. So it could be an executive, it could be your writing group, it could be you're an agent or a manager.
Yeah.
It could be a competition. It's not I call it an introductory piece only because it's the first thing that goes out. It's just a script. Yeah. So don't get stuck on the term introductory. It's just what you're going to go out with first.
Yeah, great. And Keith has another question where he says, early career writers are often working in a silo, and then if they get a job, they suddenly have to create in a group dynamic. What are some of the ways emerging writers can prepare for that sort of a transition in their career, from writing on their own by themselves to suddenly being plucked up and put in a writer's room?
Oh, yeah, it is quite it's a new, and I would say for me, very happy event. So in May, I was selected to be a part of Our Kind of People writers room. It's a Fox drama produced by Lee Daniels, and Karen Gist, who's an amazing showrunner. And suddenly I was one of, I think, 11 or 12 people in a room, and the dynamic there is wonderful. I'm in a very, very collaborative room, and my role as one of the people at the bottom of the heap is just to keep the ideas going, to sit mostly quietly. Sometimes I, engage, but I don't sort of over engage. But it's just to be supportive and to constantly add more ideas about what the characters could or should be doing. Any kind of thing that they need, any topic that's on the table, I just add my 2 cents to it, and I bring my personal experiences to that room. So that's what you're there for. You're there not only to contribute as a writer, so you will be given some scenes to write or some stories to pitch out ideas for, but also you're there to bring your personal experiences. So, I talk a lot about my kids and my family, and hey, this is, something that I've gone through personally, and they are looking for those experiences in your background because stories come out of that. It's nothing to be afraid of. And then when you can and when you have time, you then work on your own stuff on the side. But writers' rooms take up a lot of energy and a lot of time, so it's not always easy to write your own work when you're in a writer's room.
And that's really a good point to make as well. I also apologize to Robin, who I thought Robin was but Robin's female. So, when Robin know about how to put that part. So I apologize, Robin. Forgive me, please. All right. Well, look, you know what? We've just gone past 4 o'clock. And so that's basically our hour, isn't it? It's, so
that went by fast.
It really did. And, it was so honestly, Kelly, it was jam-packed full of really useful stuff. And it's been, it's just been amazing to have you at the festival, and I obviously you came to the festival under your own steam. We finally met, and this time hopefully we'll see you at S.O.U.L Fest again.
I would love that. Thank you for having me, and thank you for everybody who showed up. I'm glad you had an hour to spend with us, and hopefully you will find this and more in the book.
Yes, please remind us about the book, because it doesn't come out till October, and it's August now. So we want to make sure that people have a reminder about the book. So help us, remind us about the title of the book and when it's out.
You can pre-order it on Barnes & Noble or Amazon. It's called The Executive Chair: A Writer's Guide to TV Series Development. And in it, you'll find not only some of the things that we talked about today, but you'll hear things like, why we do lunch, how to approach someone after a conference or a panel discussion. We talk about the crazy check and what that means. We talk about the pilot story and what elements you need in your pilot story and your pilot script. And we talk a lot about pitching and taking notes, and how to take notes well, and what to do if you get a bad note. So I go through a lot of the ins and outs of Hollywood. And it's all of the things that I feel like emerging writers in particular shouldn't have to learn on the job. Why don't we just cut through the chase and just give you all the information, the keys to the kingdom, because it'll just help you come more prepared, and it'll help everyone move faster and farther up the food chain, because it's important for us to get more particularly diverse voices into the mix. We need more content. And I just sort of felt as though there was no reason that we were keeping all of this information secret. We all know it, on the executive side. So let's just share it with everybody. It makes the world a little bit happier place. So why don't we just do that?
All right. Now, this is nothing of an endorsement of a particular bookshop or the other, but I have found a link to where the book is available for pre-order, and I'll put it in the chat. So if you want to be able to kind of quickly grab that so you don't miss out on it when it's available, you can do it there, but it's not a particular endorsement of one bookseller over another. Kelly, it's been just incredible to have you. I hope we'll stay in touch. I'll be sending you probably unfortunate goat pictures in the future, I guess, but like hopefully we can stay in touch. Hopefully we can have you back at S.O.U.L Fest, and thank you so much for being part of this year's festival.
Thank you. All right, we'll see you later.
Thanks everyone for being part of today's event, and thanks for coming. Good to see some of your names there.